Mack began having experiences at age 11 with his twin brother with UFOs and eventually extraterrestrials and different orbs. He was born into a Zoroastrian family and he has taken dozens of photos of orbs and UFOs. He's been through two regressions where he's learned about his past life memories involving Draco reptilians and Lyran human-looking extraterrestrials. He's been interacting with an avian species comprising owls and also with white lion feline beings.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome, Mack, to Exopolitics Today. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Dr. Salla. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Well, you have a fascinating background. I have watched you on a couple of other shows, but I'm sure a lot of my viewers don't know about you. So why don't we start from the beginning? I mean, why don't you... I think the Zoroastrian background is very interesting, and how you were born into a Persian family living in India. So why don't you start there, and then we can, talk about your contact at 11.
Sure. So we grew up in Mumbai, India. Belonged to a group of people called the Parsis. So we're a small bunch of people, maybe about 50,000 of us left worldwide. So I was born in Mumbai, son of a Navy man. My dad was in the Merchant Navy. Mom's a housewife. And I have a twin brother. So when we were growing up in Mumbai, we had no points of reference or any sort of thoughts about UFOs or aliens. And we weren't really exposed to Western culture, so to speak, till MTV showed up in about 1991. And for me, I remember the day like it was yesterday. It will haunt me for the rest of my life because so we lived in an open colony called the Parsi colony, where there's all these Parsi Zoroastrians staying, and there's a fire temple close by. And what happened was the date was 12th April 1991. And I'll get to why I remember the date, and the time was 9:15 p.m. So the way that this apartment building was shaped was it was 5 levels. So one layer of cake and then another layer of cake, if you can imagine, on top of it. So we're on the 3rd level, and the way the apartment is shaped is one straight line and a parallel wraparound balcony that you can walk outside the length of the balcony. So I was in my room about 9:15 p.m. I heard this deep hum emanating from the outside. And I was too busy in my thoughts of girls and playing with my He-Man toys, listening to Alice in Chains. And then I hear this hum, this whoa, 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 whoa. Very bizarre, deep hum. It was vibrating through my body. So I said, look, I'm really curious. So something pulled me out on the balcony. Now, when I go out on the balcony, there's a building opposite me that's probably about the same 7-story height, and I would say 3 stories above that. So I'm estimating about 10 stories high was this egg-shaped craft, or like an American football-shaped craft. And I couldn't believe what my eyes were seeing, Dr. Salla. The only way that I can describe it is the reason I know it was egg-shaped or American football-shaped was there were lights on the perimeter of the craft that kept sort of going on and off, and it was red, blue, and green. And every time I say this, I still feel like it sounds crazy, but in the middle of the craft opened up a portal or a window, and it was yellow in color. And when that portal opened up, a 3-fingered hand came out, and this kind of looks like the Star Trek Spock sign, but it's basically just 3 fingers, and it was completely black, the fingers against the yellow background, and it was waving at me like this. So now when something's waving at you, your natural reaction is to wave back. So I'm waving back at this thing, and I'm not knowing what I'm seeing, basically. And this thing is literally stuck in the sky. And this whole experience was about 10 minutes, I think, estimated 10, 15 minutes, but it felt like forever. So I'm looking at this thing, my brain's trying to figure out what the hell am I seeing? And I start seeing it slowly move across to the right. And I'm like, wait a minute, if this thing's so close, how come other people can't see it? So I said, okay, I'm going to run from my room through the living room, go out on the wraparound balcony and see if I can catch it there. So when I go out on the balcony, what shocks me is at the end of the balcony, I'm still looking at the craft in the sky, but it's my twin brother who's having the same experience as me. So he's stuck frozen like this, waving at this thing in the sky. So I go up to him and I'm like, do you see that as well? And he goes, yeah. So we're both standing side by side and we're both waving at this thing, not knowing what to make of it. Because we had MTV at that time, we vaguely heard about UFOs and aliens, and I was never really interested in any of that. But I said, okay, maybe putting two and two together, that's what it could be. So we ran inside the house and we are like, hey, mom, we saw something like a UFO. And my mom's like, 11-year-old kids, wild imagination. That time, remember, it's 1991. We had no phones, no social media, no digital cameras, no Facebook. So in my mom's wisdom, she said, go in separate rooms while your minds are fresh and draw this for me. So we both go in separate rooms immediately after the sighting. We haven't discussed anything between both the brothers. And we both draw something. I come out first and I show my mom the drawing, which is the illustration at the top. That's my one. And then my brother's one is the one on the bottom. So when my mom sees the illustration on the bottom, that's when she knows that they've seen something because it's exactly the same thing. The detail is pretty amazing in the sense that both the photographs or the illustrations show the pudgy hand coming out. My brother wrote the word flash, so he may have seen a light flash, but I didn't see any lights flashing. But yeah, so that was it. And if you go down to the third image, I asked Olaf Ruckner, who is an artist based in Sweden, to actually illustrate. I commissioned him to illustrate what we saw, and he's done a fantastic job. So that was the first experience, which is the craft. Now, this experience lasted about 15 minutes. And when my mom saw both the illustrations side by side, she was like, okay, you definitely had some kind of experience. So she had an open mind. My father, not so much. We didn't really discuss this with him because he was extremely strict. Now, after this experience,
I was just going to say, so this is in Mumbai, India, which is a very crowded place. Now, I guess, were there any reports, local reports or anything about this craft or that you saw?
Absolutely no idea, Dr. Salah, because we were 11 years old. We had no MUFON there. I don't think UFOs were even spoken about in India, but this craft was pretty massive and it was so up close when we saw it. It was a life-changing experience that we had. So then we decided, you know what, we're going to document this, and we never thought about it. Right after this experience, Dr. Salah, I was 11 years old, and I know that for 3 months right after this, I started having what we call orb experiences. So I would be eating dinner, and I would be mentally told to go out on the wraparound balcony and start walking the length of the balcony. So when I walked the length of the balcony, I would see two golden orbs that would come down from the horizon, and they would just follow me while I walked the length of the balcony. And I did this for about 3 months. So that's what they looked like. So they were pretty much golden in color. They were circular. And I decided to ask them a question in my mind, and I looked at these two orbs and I said, if you can hear me, can you turn right? So the one that I could see on the right moved to the right. And then I asked the one on the left, if you can hear me, can you move to the left? And it moved to the left. And then I said out loud, I said, if you can read my lips, if you can hear my voice, can you cross each other? And they crossed each other. And it was the scariest situation of my life. I was like, I had no idea what was going on. So that was my first experience with the phenomenon, age 11. We moved around quite a bit. So now I'm about 44, going on 45. So we lived in Mumbai till we were 13. We moved to New Zealand for a few years in Auckland. The only thing I remember happening in Auckland is a lot of sleep paralysis. So I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would see a being that I could describe with big black eyes and wispy hair, almost like a gray hybrid, kind of crouching down looking at me. And that's all I remember. In 2000, we moved to Queensland, Australia, to the Gold Coast. And my parents bought a house that was being rented by a rabbi. And I'll never forget this day. My mom said, go get the keys for the house because we're going to move in. So I go to the house meet the rabbi, see his wife with the baby, get the keys, go home, think nothing of it. We move into this house, and it's maybe a few months later, in early 2000s. So me and my brother are sleeping in the same room, and I wake up at 1 in the morning, and I feel a presence in the room, almost like someone's in your personal space. Like imagine if you're on public transport and someone's right in your face, and you're like, step away. So that's the physical sensation I got. So I wake up and I look beyond my feet on the bed, and I see a golden outline of three people standing at the edge of my bed. And I see the outline of the rabbi to the T. And I think there's an illustration by Olaf there, one of the rough illustrations of me sleeping in bed. And right at the edge of my bed is the rabbi, and I can see the outline with his, sideburns coming down, incredibly detailed, yeah. His wife and his child standing at the edge of my bed, just a golden outline. And it really freaked me out. I was thinking, oh my God, like, what am I seeing? Am I seeing spirits? Being born into the Zoroastrian religion, I wasn't very religious, but I started praying in our Western language, started praying our prayers. And in about 15 minutes, they actually disappeared. Now, to my right was my brother that was sleeping. I asked him the next day, I said, did you see anything? And he wouldn't speak to me for 3 days. Like, he would not mention anything. So then I told my mom, and I said, Mom, I actually saw these people at the end of my bed. And she said, we kind of speculated that maybe they may have passed away and the spirits are just coming back to where they were living. So I thought nothing of it. Now, after a few days, Dr. Salah, I pestered my brother like crazy, and I said, come on, tell me, what did you see? And what he told me was completely the opposite. He said that when I was sleeping, he saw, in his words, a giant winged creature, like a big bat, crouched down on my chest, sitting on my chest, looking down at my chest, almost like it was sucking my energy. And when I recall that time in my 20s, it was really difficult period for me. I was going through a lot of hard times in my life, just physical abuse. I've been through a bit of sexual abuse. And I had just overall general bad luck. And I always had this weird depressive feeling sitting here. So I said, this is something that you saw, but I couldn't see. And he says that this thing, the way he described it, was a giant bat, spread its wings. And I feel crazy even saying this. And it said that it recognized when my brother looked at it, spread its wings, had big red eyes, looked at it. They made eye contact, got really angry, and then it flew off my chest. And then I said, you didn't see the spirits at the end of my bed? And he goes, no, I didn't. So over the years, we kind of speculated that this was potentially a reptilian attachment that I had. And these beings of the golden light were almost like watching over me, making sure that whatever was happening wouldn't continue.
Mm-hmm. There is a book about these dark bat-like beings that do perform this kind of negative role of siphoning people's energy. They're called Mothmen. And I believe the author of the book was John Keel, and he wrote a book about Mothman. And it was described similar to what you just described there, as this kind of very dark bat-like being. I think it was red eyes or something like that, and it would terrify people and do things to them. And but yeah, it sounds very similar.
Yeah, and I had the worst luck in my life in my 20s. Like, anything that could go wrong, career, relationships, love, abuse, everything just came hitting me all at once. And I was like, I'm not sure what's going on. It was almost like a negative entity attachment, as you would say. All right, so then moving on, after that experience, that was in my early 20s. So we were in Queensland, Australia for a few years, and then I decided to move to Vancouver, Canada, to be with my wife for about 10 years. That's why my accent's all over the place. In Vancouver, nothing happened. I was just focused on living, just getting married and trying to build a life. And then we decided to come back to Australia in 2014, moved to Queensland, and then decided to move to Melbourne about 6 years ago. Now, everything started going haywire for me after COVID. So during COVID, I had no work. because I used to work as a hospitality manager, and then all of a sudden, no work. So for a year and a half, I sat at home getting depressed, eating McDonald's every day, 2 combos of Maccas and putting on about 150 kilos. And in that time, I think my awakening process started. I was watching more, videos online. I was catching up on, learning about yourself and your journey, Elena Danan's journey. I was learning about the Journey to Truth guys and all this stuff coming out through Project Camelot, Project Avalon. And I never really thought anything of it. I'm like, okay, if it is, it is, right? I decided to go for a weight loss surgery in 2022. Almost immediately after the weight loss surgery, I started experiencing what we describe as a Kundalini awakening or symptoms thereof. So I would feel the pressure here in my third eye. I'd be able to perceive the aura around my hands. I'd be able to see like a golden light emanating from my hands, and that really scared me. I would have time dilation experiences. So in Melbourne, when I would go to work, I would wait to cross the road in the city. And on Burke Street, where the trams are, this one day I was waiting to cross the road, and I could see when people were crossing the road, they were going normally, and then all of a sudden time slowed down. And I was rubbing my eyes thinking I'm losing my mind. So I said, look, I need to...
Can you describe when you say you saw them moving, time slowed down. So what exactly did you see?
So I saw the people crossing the road normally like they would. And then it was almost like watching them cross the road in slow motion, people picking up their phones in slow motion. It was like time slowed down for me. And I just didn't know what to make of it. And it was almost like that moment felt like an hour for me, but it was only a few seconds. Imagine just watching people walk and then all of a sudden it slows down your vision. And then I started getting a lot of pressure in the forehead. I reached out to people on this Project Avalon forum, and through these weird synchronicities, I found out, maybe I should do this QHHG session, past life regression, and see if there's anything to it. So I found a lady here in Melbourne, and before the session, so it was a 5-hour session, important for the audience to know that I was not invested in the phenomenon. I really didn't care about it. I heard about the reptilians maybe through, a couple of interviews with Elena Danan, with David Icke. Never thought of any of that stuff. I go for the regression. And at the start of the regression, till today, my hands started emanating energy. So I feel my hands burning like crazy. The regression therapist, when I started speaking to her, her face physically started changing. And she said, it's not my physical face that you're seeing, but it's my energetic body that's coming out. So it was all these parts of the Kundalini awakening. And when I started the regression is when kind of opened up a can of worms. So when I started the regression, the first images I got was me floating over a crystalline pyramid in a planet which has purple skies. And I'm basically a ball of light. So I go through the pyramid and other balls of light are coming out. And when I'm through the pyramid looking outwards at the sky, a word forms, Lyra. Beyond that word is a humanoid female or like a gray being. So this is what shows up. So she says, I'm your Lyran mother. You were born in the Lyran constellation. And she didn't look like a typical gray because her eyes were very detailed. If you go down two slides, you can see after the regression, I drew her eyes and they were very elongated, almost like pink and purple swirls, like oil on water. So it was a very detailed view. And she said, your soul origin is Lyran. So you were born in the Lyran system. Now, after that memory, I start to feel my hands burning and my eyes are closed. So I look up at my hands. My hands are human. And when I flip my hands over, they basically turn green and scaly and I would say reptilian. Now, this really, really upset me. Like, this shocked me. I was like hyperventilating. I had no idea what was going on. In my childhood, there was always a recurring nightmare that I had of this wooden door with 2 flames on the side, and I would never go through that door. I would always wake up. Ever since I was 7 years old, I can remember that. That door shows up beyond the hands. So I turn my hands and I push the door backwards, when I push the door backwards, I see something that disturbs me to this day, which was basically a reptilian feeding session. So these reptilians were pretty much having dinner, I would say. So they were, feeding on lower life forms. They were feeding on humans. I myself was feeding on a human child, and I was feeding on other life forms. Now, when I see this, it's extremely, so that's the being there. It's extremely disturbing to me because I'm seeing this in graphic detail. Now, after this experience, I find myself on my starship looking out at the stars, and I start realizing that I'm developing a soul as a reptilian. Reptilians don't actually have souls. And I start developing this soul is because I've been eating these different life forms. I've been absorbing their life force energy, including the Lyran. So I realized that I actually hadn't reincarnated as a reptilian. I was living through the reptilian eyes with the soul fragments of the Lyran that were stuck in this reptilian, if that makes sense. So as soon as this reptilian starts developing the soul, he's like, no, what I'm doing is not right. He starts developing emotions. And that's when I find myself on the table.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of like explore that a little bit further, because I haven't heard that before, that Draconians don't have souls. Now, I wonder, how did you know that? I mean, was that something that they were talking about? I mean, could it have been that in feeding on the humans that the beings participating in that feeding session were kind of like taking in the human energy and developed like qualities of a soul, or qualities of like empathy that might not be part of the normal draconian mind view, but they would still have a soul. But can you explain that?
Yeah, so when I talk about the soul, it's everything to do with the emotions, the essence. Like you can still be alive and have consciousness, but consciousness and the soul aspect are two separate things. So what was happening was this being started developing these emotions, developing this soul based on the life that he was consuming, and it was only him. It wasn't happening to any of the other Draconians. So now I find myself in a room, lying down on a gurney, and the screen goes dark. I look behind and I feel pressure on my temples. So the regression therapist asked me, push forth your vision so you can see what's happening. So when I tilt my head back, I see a short gray, what I describe as a short gray, with his palms on my forehead, doing something, and I can feel the pressure. What I then see next is beyond my reptilian feet. There's a large, very large, 8-9 foot tall draconian being. So this is a rough diagram of the process, the soul scalping process that I went through. So the draconian was actually at my feet, laughing at this procedure because he knew what was happening, and my body was in extreme pain. I could feel this life force being circulating in my chest area. Now, behind the reptilian, I saw an even taller being in a purple cape working on a computer screen. That's what I would describe as a mantid being. So this mantid was more like a scientist, and the mantid pressed a button on one of these digital displays. The reptilian that I was, or the body that I was inhabiting, started convulsing, and this orange light came out of the body. It was being extracted, and the Greys, what they did was they instructed the little orange light to go into this glass container. So it was like a soul scalping procedure. After that,
can we talk a little bit about that, like this soul scraping procedure? So, I mean, you were a reptilian at that point.
Yeah.
You had, after having fed on humans, you developed, a soul. So were they taking out just fragments of that soul for use, or what were they doing?
No, they took out the entire soul because the draconian was telling me that having a soul is an infection. It's like a disease to the draconian agenda. And they said their agenda is domination, infiltration. They can't afford to have those emotions in those human souls because it will corrupt themselves. They're very, very focused on their agenda.
Well, that's very fascinating, actually, because, and I know you talk about this too, that you talk about how we are all fractals of source energy, which is which is kind of like a synonym for the soul. So does that mean that the Draco reptilians, that many of them actually practice this process of not developing that quality or extracting it and moving it on and just having some sort of consciousness or AI that
So I
motivates
think,
their thinking?
yeah, so they're very much based on an AI life form inhibiting their bodies. So they're obsessed with the soul, and I'll get to that. From all my experiences, I learned that this entire thing about disclosure, about NHI, biologics, it's all about consciousness. It's a battle for the soul, and I'll get to that. I'll explain why that is. So now, after this process happens, they dispose of the reptilian body, and I'm not sure what they did with the soul. So they just basically stored the soul in this glass container. So that's what I remember of this memory. Now, after this, I asked my higher self, who am I? Who's this being? And I started channeling the being. And my regression therapist was actually freaking out because my voice went down. I said, my name is Arak from Alpha Draconis, Rak, the reptilian, and he spelled it out, Rakkh. And then he started saying weird things like, so that's the self-portrait I drew after the regression. I started saying weird things like we live in the shadows in the earth realm, and we have put out our representation through your movies. And a movie came through the regression called Jupiter Ascending. And they said, you need to watch Jupiter Ascending again because it will show you the true disclosure, which is off-world humans colluding with the reptilians and the Greys. And in that movie, they show the reptilians as a sort of a second-class citizen working with the higher beings. And they're using Earth as a farm. And I was just, when all this was coming in my head, I had never thought of any of this stuff before. So it's almost like they're saying that we need to pay attention to the media, that these things are out there. And when you get a chance, Dr. Salah, go back and watch that movie. You may get some nuggets out of that. So then
I've watched it. I've watched it quite a few times, and I recommend it to people. Jupiter Ascending. It's kind of like it's definitely soft disclosure.
It's mind blowing because I went to see it again after the regression, and I'm like, oh my god, it's right there in your face that this is actually happening. And then towards the end of the regression, I was telling the regression therapist that if you mention our agenda to anyone, we will kill you. So I was flat out threatening her in this lower voice of this being. At the end of the regression, we asked my higher self, so is there good and bad in the universe? And the higher self ended the regression by saying, there is no good, there is no bad, there only is or is not. That is all. To me, my perception or understanding of that is good and bad are constructs of the human mind, and that we all have a choice whether to do good or to do bad. And then I asked further, and I pushed further, and I said, well, why did you reincarnate me in this human life? And the answer I got was, the soul is forever. The soul is on a school journey. When you incarnated as a Lyran being, the feline, Lyran, avian hybrid, whatever they call it, you only knew the concepts of good, so you never really appreciated that life. You had no concept of malevolence or being evil. In order for you to learn that, you came through in this reptilian being and you saw what their lives are like. Now, I said, well, the reptilian life wasn't that much. I mean, I wasn't really suffering in that life. I was just in a different physical form, doing exactly what they're doing, which is, eating other life forms like we do. When we eat chickens and cows, we don't know what the cows or chickens are thinking. So it's unfair to say all reptilians are bad, because guess what? Humans are bad as well, right? So
Yeah.
that thinking we have to get away from.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of like understand a little bit better how the Draco reptilians think and behave, given that they don't have a soul, as you understand it, or as you were told, because you know what it's like to have a soul, and sure, we feed on other animals and all of that, but we have a soul.
Yeah.
Which influences our behavior. I mean, we might say a prayer for the animal. There's an empathy, but for the Draco reptilians, you know, what's it like for them
It's,
to feed on other life forms, or they're kind of like their thinking process. What's that like?
when I was in that reptilian body, it was a very cold life. It was almost like if you can imagine a shark smelling blood. It was like it was lust for them when I was feeding. I mean, it's hard for me to even say this because I'm getting medical treatment for this because it's a lot to take in. I can see the person that I'm eating. I can see the creatures that I'm eating, but they don't feel anything. Like they don't have any emotions like we do, like the humans do. So they're a very militaristic race. They just want to conquer. That's it. I know I'll probably get crap for this, but it's like, the Germans on Earth. They're very, very focused on what they want to do. There's no emotion, just get the job done. And that's exactly how they are. And I think that's also why I suspect they lined up with the Germans on Earth a long time ago, is because they have that same kind of frequency, in the sense that we have an agenda, we just need to get things done. Now, after that regression, Dr. Sala, it was extremely difficult. I was very suicidal because I would be sitting at home and I would hear their voices in my head, and a voice would say, "Draconis, remember who you are." So this one day I was sitting just where I'm sitting right now, and I started hearing this voice thinking I'm going crazy. And the voice kept saying only one word, "Draconis, remember who you are." And I said, "Get out of my head. I don't want to be this reptilian being. I've moved beyond that." And then I started doing automatic writing. So if you bring up those illustrations where I wrote the word Draconis, so I told my wife, get me a notepad. So I get the notepad and I start writing the word Draconis, and then I started writing this weird alien symbols, alien language. It was almost like automatic writing, like I couldn't stop my hand from writing. Then I flipped the page over and I start drawing the reptilian eye. So I drew a very detailed reptilian eye because every time I closed my eyes, I would see the reptilian eyes in detail. And then I flipped the page over again, and that's when the being says, "Go on." And I start drawing the eye. I start drawing the other eye. I draw the outline of the face. And then I end up drawing almost the entire self-portrait of who I was as this being, including the ridges, including the attention to detail was pretty scary. Like, and I've never thought of that before in my life. Never, how were they able to do this? To project their thoughts into our head. So we were able to draw this being exactly as it was. So this is still kind of a work in progress because the face had markings on it, but I was just too traumatized to draw any further. So if you go up, you might see the page. So see there's that page above the Lyran eyes. So I would see that symbol all the time. So it would be like an eye and a triangle, and then two triangles together, almost like the Lyran constellation. So after this, so that's the page there. So it says Draconis, and it could as well be chicken scratch, but I'm not sure what these words mean. So
You said this was kind of like automatic writing.
Was automatic writing, and it's almost like it was written with a purpose. The symbol with the triangle in the eye always seems to show up in my thoughts. So now, after this, I was I was pained because I was going through this. So then I joined X and I started speaking to experiencers on there. And when we started speaking to experiencers, I found an experiencer support group held by a young gentleman by the name of Christian Carroll, Irish American, and Paul Ramos. Paul is Porter. So we started doing these online X spaces where we started speaking about our collective experiences, and the phenomenon started presenting itself while we were speaking about it on spaces. So I would be out in the park and I would see orbs flying over my head. Christian would see the same in America. So this story got picked up by vetted podcasts as to what is exactly going on. And we kind of speculated that the phenomenon knows when we're speaking about it. It's almost like we may be living in a simulation and it's trying to tease us. So I would see these orbs over my head. So the most significant sighting I had with shared sighting with them was about 30 or 40 orbs manifesting right above my head and going past me. And I have a 6-minute video on my YouTube channel. It's just a silent video. Now, the thing is, that very day I saw the SpaceX satellites, and I have a satellite tracker, and I'm a fairly rational person. So I was thinking to myself, could these be satellites? So I got out my satellite app, and no satellites were registering. So Dr. Salah, how I can describe it is I was looking up towards Orion's belt, and a light would manifest and then just fly off, and they would fly off in different directions. And I got 6 minutes of that when that happened. So the orbs, they started again. So then I started meditating to Dr. Joe Dispensa's meditations, Walk for the World meditations, for my self-healing to get rid of this reptilian attachment. And that's when the orbs and the craft started going crazy. So if you start showing the orb photographs, yeah. So I would go out on my balcony and I would look at Orion's belt and I would start seeing different shaped orbs and craft. And to the naked eye, they would just look like balls of light flying across. But when you take screenshots, photographs, and then you put filters to them, you get all these bizarre shapes. Like you'll get a disc-shaped version right there. And then there's a weird drone-shaped version. If you zoom in, I honestly don't know what to make of these. Could these be black tech from the government that we don't know about? And look at the next one. It's a completely different shape. The next one below that is amazing. It's the Merkaba star, the fire. It kind of looks like a fire. And this one's very common. I see this quite a bit. Now, after I started doing these Walk for the World meditations, Dr. Sala, and the orbs and the craft started showing up, I started getting helicopter surveillance. So I live close to Melbourne Airport, but the flight path is not over my... So black helicopters started going over my place. So the day that this started happening, so the week after the orbs started showing up, I go outside and I'm like, why are these helicopters flying over my apartment? And all of a sudden, I see this black helicopter just hovering over my apartment. And I don't know what it is. So I reached out to people and I said, what's going on? Spoke to a gentleman by the name of James Barkley, who's a reptilian abductee. And he said black helicopters are part of the phenomenon. And this was right outside my balcony, Dr. Sala, a jet black helicopter with no insignias whatsoever, pretty much just hovering over there. Now, I'll see if I can try and find the photograph of this for you. So then I kept meditating and I kept seeing these orbs and crafts. I started also getting weird synchronicities. So I would get number synchronicities, like I would get this on my car, like 333, 777. At my work, when people would phone me, I would see 777 on their phone numbers, just crazy synchronicities. So then I, delving deeper, I said, what are these orbs and crafts? I started, was reading Chris Bledsoe's book, UFO of God, and I was reading about his life, the owl synchronicities. Next week, I meditated and I saw an owl being in my meditation. So this face shows up and you should have the diagram there. So immediately after this 2-hour meditation, this owl being shows up. I draw the owl being and from the very next day onwards, I started getting what's called owl synchronicities. So me and my wife went off to regional Victoria to an antique store the next day. And for 3 hours, all I saw, Dr. Sala, was photographs of owls, figurines of owls. It was crazy. It was all over the place. So the owl being, it's more like a bird, alien being with long ears and a kind of a beak. So after I saw, I had the black helicopter experience, and then this owl being showed up. I decided I was going to go see Mary Rodwell for a regression because I was seeing all these orbs with faces in them. So faces of gray aliens in the orbs. So I went off for this regression with Mary Rodwell, and I said, Mary, we need to figure out what's going on because I don't have any answers and I just keep getting more and more questions. So then Mary asked me, if you watch the regression, it's on my YouTube channel. You can focus on your past lives or you can focus on now. And I said, we need to focus on now. So in this regression, again, what I learned just completely blew my mind. In this regression, I am in a field, in a grassy field. I'm looking up at Orion's belt where I always see the orbs and crafts coming from. That's where I feel the affinity for. From Orion's belt comes down this golden orb. While it's coming down, I look to my right, and there is a mantid being, very tall, very ancient, in a purple cape standing beside me. And I ask the mantid being, what are you doing here? So he does this, puts one of his paws on my heart, and the other claw he points up at the orb. The orb comes down. The orb morphs into a golden triangular craft. And from this craft come out these three beings, these owl-headed beings with the body of men in golden armor. And some people call them aliens, some people call them carrions. So they came down. Their voices were very robotic. It wasn't like a normal voice. The leader of the group said, come with me. So he put out his hand, and I took his hand and I went to the craft. When we're in the craft, we fly off the planet, and this is an actual memory. When we fly off the planet, we fly into the stars, and we go to this big orange golden sun. And we're flying through the sun. And when I'm experiencing this through the regression, I feel complete. I feel like I've reached the purpose of my life. That all the pain and suffering I went through in this human life and as a reptilian just disappeared. And I asked them and I said, why are we at the all? I'm sorry, why are we at the sun? Why are we going through the sun? And they said in their words, they said, you're not at the sun, you're at the all, ALA. And I was like, what do you mean by the all? And they said, in their words, they said, we are all fractals of source and we belong to the all. The all is what you call God consciousness in your English construct, in your English language. And we are all part of it. And that blew my mind. So I'm like, you've actually taken me to see God. And they're like, yes. And I'm like, what's my purpose? What are we doing here? Who are you? I asked them. And they said, we call ourselves the guardians of souls or the keepers of souls. And I said, can you elaborate further what you mean by that? And they said that they are a part of a race of beings that are fighting a war against a different faction of NHI in what we perceive to be the astral realm. So they called it the astral wars. And I said, which are the species? And they said, we're fighting against the reptilians and the gray hybridization agenda. So I was very confused. I said, what do you mean by that? And they said that the grays and the reptilians can't live on this 3D construct on Earth in their 3D form. It's very difficult for them. So how do they infiltrate? How are they able to live here? They build hybrids in their craft. So they steal the semen, they steal the eggs, they abduct people, they build their hybrids. But now think of it for a second, Dr. Sala. A hybrid is just a shell. You can't just have an empty shell. You need to have something in there. You need to have a soul in there. So what they also do is they abduct people and they take fragments of their soul, part of the soul scalping procedure. Now we're getting into from the first regression, so connecting the dots. So they also abduct people, they steal either parts of their soul or the entire soul. They can dispose of the body, and they put these souls in the hybrids. They infiltrate them here on Earth. So this is what they call the astral war. And I said,
Can
well,
I just kind of like interrupt there? Because I know there's a lot of people that describe going up into the ships and being told that, well, these are your children. But is it possible that rather than them being their children, well, maybe biologically, the semen or the eggs are connected to them. But I'm wondering, how does this soul scalping apply to that? Could could that hybrid actually have a slice of the soul of the genetic donor that's put into that hybrid body, and that's why these people feel an affinity for the hybrids?
So my understanding of what they told me was the hybrid body is it's just an empty shell, but they actually need the soul as well in there. So I have heard of other experiencers that have been up on crafts with grays and have seen souls in containers. After my regression, I even just recently saw Mark Demizio's. I just heard Mark Demizio's podcast with you where he spoke about soul scalping, and I was absolutely blown away. So this thing is definitely happening. You need to have the soul and you need to have the body in order to be able to live on this 3D construct. So this is basically what's happening up there. And they said, my mission is to find other experiencers like me and to spread the message that this is the reality, this is happening, this is part of disclosure. And part of disclosure is not just that there's other life forms out there, but it's as humans, we've forgotten the power that we have. So we're allowing these other species to manipulate us over a period of time, but we've forgotten that we have this power within us to stop this from happening and to spread this message that it is happening. And so after I had this regression, my experience about these astral wars were corroborated by a few people. Dr. Jack Sarfati came on an X space, which is those spaces we discuss. And I asked Dr. Sarfati, I said, do you know about these orbs that people are seeing everywhere? What are these orbs? What am I seeing in the skies? Do you know of this war? And he goes, oh, yeah. He just nonchalantly says, the orbs are a third species of NHI that the government are aware of that are in a war with these species that are underwater. And I said, are these underwater species the grays? And he says, yes. There was another experiencer in the UK, Lyran McIntosh. She did an interview with Linda Moulton Howe, said the same thing. There's different species and there's a war happening. So now, after these experiences, Dr. Sala, like I was completely lost. I was thinking, what do I even make of this? How do I know any of this is true? Then I start seeing interviews with Elena Danan, and she speaks of the CFR. That blows my mind. I listen to JP. JP takes photographs of triangular craft. I see triangular craft in the sky, like the one I filmed. I send JP that photograph on Instagram, and he doesn't reply most of the time, but he actually replied with one word saying nice. So that was a little bit of corroboration for me that my experiences are real. This is actually happening. So yeah, like I've filmed blue Tic Tac craft. The TR3B was a very harrowing experience. So that experience, if I get into, was it was a Sunday and helicopters were circling my apartment for some bizarre reason. I went outside on the balcony and I filmed a 4-second video of this helicopter going over my apartment. And I took some shots with my phone. When I looked at these shots, Dr. Sala, I was absolutely shocked because right above in the sky, you can see so clear as day a black triangular craft while the helicopter is flying over my apartment. So that's the close-up of the craft there. Now, I started shaking when I had this experience. So I go inside and I tell my wife, can you see this on the photograph? There's an actual craft up there. So there's a photograph with the helicopter and the craft. And this is just a close-up of it. So basically what happens is my wife then puts this 4-second video on the TV. And in the 4-second video, these craft are so fast, we break down the video. You can see the craft turn white and fly off after the helicopter in 4 seconds, Dr. Sala. Like we literally had to go frame by frame. And in each frame, you can see the shape of the craft is triangular. And this left me with severe PTSD after this experience. So after this experience, I had another weird experience where I woke up at 1 in the morning and I thought, why am I hearing a helicopter outside my apartment? Very bizarre. So I woke up and I was drawn out on my balcony. I go out on my balcony and I can see Melbourne City. And next to Melbourne City, it's about 1 in the morning. You can hear the crows crowing in the video, and you can see this pulsating orange orb just in the sky, just standing there in the sky, orb or drone or whatever. And it's just there. And I stood out there for half an hour. I took a video for half an hour, but I put out like a 2-minute video of this thing. And then again, from afar, it just looks like a blinking light. But when you take the photograph, you could see the whole orange orb, perfect circular orb, just hanging out in the sky. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, it's coming to me from all angles. After that, then all of a sudden, by some miracle, I saw this episode with you and Jalila Star, and I've been trying. I'm dying to reach her to let her know that her message is 100% spot on, because that's my life, that's my experience. When she started speaking about, the Carians being the master race that built the reptilians, that also built the humans, and I was like, oh my God, I've been through all those lives, and my original life was the feline race. And how I found out even further about the feline race, Dr. Sala, was in my first regression, I was only told, Lyra, you were born in the Lyran system. They didn't show me much more. But after watching these interviews, one day I was about to speak to an experiencer. So I woke up in the morning and I found scratches on my back where I couldn't reach. And I've got photographs of those. So right behind my shoulder, it's as if someone took 2 nails and scratched down my back. And I was feeling the pain. So I told my wife in the morning, I was like, did you get mad at me and scratch me? And she was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I said, take photographs of these. So she took photographs of the scratch on my back. And that's the arm. So you'll find one with 2 scratches. So that very night, it might be below. So that very night, I was actually going to speak to an experiencer in the park. See, that's the helicopter right there with the TR3B. If you go up, click on that one, and you see the TR3B on the bottom there. And the one below that is the blue Tic Tac that I saw.
I see.
Crazy shape, right? Like, so now going back to this, I got these scratches on my back, and so that's the scratches there on the back. So I'm bending down, and these are 2 scratches, and they were very painful. Now, common sense prosaic explanation is that I may have reached over to scratch it, but these were all the way on the bottom, so there's no way I would be reaching down. And if I was reaching this way, the scratches would go from down to up, but you could see the trajectory of these scratches going from up to down. So that night, I was kissing my wife goodnight and said, I'm going to walk in the park. I was in a very meditative state, which tends to happen to me when I have these experiences with these orbs. I reach out to her and I say, bye, sweetie, and I give her a kiss, and I feel a sharp pain on my arm. And right over here, Dr. Sala, is a massive scratch that happens in real time, which I've got a photograph of. So I'm like, I tell my wife, did you just see this? And she goes, yep. We didn't know what to make of it. So took a picture of it. I spoke to the experiencer for half an hour, saw flashes in the sky, recorded the flashes. It was a weird half an hour experience with him. The next day when I came back home, this whole scratch or scar disappears like nothing ever happened. And this is literally like 10 seconds after the scratch happened. So I was thinking to myself, is this the reptilian side trying to compete for my attention? Because this is the way they want to get the attention. And then after this, I saw Jalila Star's interview, and I said, oh, wow, I'm finally able to put some pieces together. The night I saw Jalila Star's interview, Dr. Sala, I was getting this feeling that there's energies in my house, and I cannot see the orbs in my house unless I have my phone with me. So these are like the spirit orbs. So I got in bed and pulled out my phone, and I just put my hand out because I was feeling the energy, and this orb flew by. So now when this orb flies by, I think nothing of it. I get up the next morning and start playing around with the filters. And the most amazing sight is right before my eyes, is the face of a feline being. So you can see the eyes, you can see the cheekbones, you can see the face, you can see the mouth of the being looking at me. It was unreal. It was unreal. And the orb was only about maybe this small. But when I put it up on X, people started helping me put filters through it. And you can see the perfect circular shape of the orb, and you can see this feline lion being staring right back at me. And I thought, wow, this is the feline being showing themselves to me. This is who I actually am. Yeah, so then I'll go into this one. So this one was the very next profound experience, which is a week after seeing that orb in my house. I felt compelled to go out on the balcony, and I see a white orb flying past, and I'm like, wait a minute, how come nobody else is seeing this? So I tell my wife, come out and see this thing. And she sees the orb flying by. I take a video of it and see the shimmery white thing. And I take photographs of this, Dr. Sala. And when I take photographs of this, this is exactly what it showed. To me, it looks like a white lion with the mane and the face and the eyes. It's so incredibly detailed, and it's just mind-blowing. And after that, I saw your interview where you speak about going to the Monroe Institute and seeing a white lion. And I was blown away. I was like, what is happening? That is just an amazing synchronicity that you were able to see that, and I was able
that was one of the journeys. That they have a Starlines course, and so I was projecting my consciousness out, and they walked us through the process of going to different star systems in our galaxy and beyond. And so when I went to the Sirius star system, I just projected my consciousness out there, and there was this lion being that was associated with one of the planets in the Sirius star system that just came out, and it just gave me the message: unified planetary consciousness.
Yeah, I was absolutely blown away by that message. And now, Dr. Sala, where I am in my journey is I'm reaching out to experiencers, and we're kind of supporting each other, speaking about our experiences. Joint experiences that we're having simultaneously worldwide, like between myself, Christian, and Paul, and another very wonderful gentleman called Eric Mitchell, who is also a very high-level experiencer. He has his own support group. So when I was going through all these, Eric was a huge help to me. I was very suicidal, Dr. Sala, because this is not for the faint of heart. Going through all these experiences, I've had shadow beings in my house, and you can go through all the photographs. I mean, I've seen the metallic orbs. I've seen donut-shaped craft, like C-shaped craft, like the one that they shot down in Yukon. I've seen a flower-shaped craft. And I feel that some of these are crafts, some of these are actual beings that are alive. And they left me with three very powerful messages, Dr. Sala. When I was doing X-Space with Christian, he said, ask the orbs who they are. Do they have a message? And I asked them, and I looked up with them and I said, who are you? And this is what they told me. They said, we are you and you are us. Together, we are the heavens. So that was the cryptic message that they gave me. So that was message number one. Message number two was, I said to them, why are people just wasting their time looking outwards at the universe, looking outwards at the stars for life when we know it's already there? And this message just popped up in my head, and they said, the universe you seek outwards is the universe within. Again, the universe you seek outwards is the universe within. Very powerful messages. So then I started meditating more, learning more about myself. And then the third powerful message came was when Susie Hansen, a New Zealand-based experiencer, put up a post on Facebook saying experiencers are now meeting worldwide. They're forming these soul connections. I've met so many experiencers through the podcasts I've done and through X. They just reach out to me and we kind of meet. And we have this weird soul connection. Like, we are not bound by blood, but it's almost like we're bound by the soul, and we are gravitating towards each other. So now it's my dream to be able to come to the States one day, maybe meet you, JP, and Elena, if my wife lets me. So we have this little group that we speak on Signal, and they're like, "Oh, it's such a coincidence that we all met. Such a coincidence." And then all of a sudden, they put a thought in my head, and I typed it down right away, and they said, "There are no coincidences, only connections. There are no coincidences, only connections." So it's almost like they're giving me this drip information that's coming through. And the person that I used to be in my 20s, I'm not in my 40s. I've 360 degrees changed. I've become extremely spiritual. I'm not into material things, although we need material things to survive. And I feel like now my mission in this life is just to help experiencers go through this process that we're going through, and the disclosure process. And it's happening, Dr. Salah, and nobody can stop it.
I agree with that. I think you have some unique contributions to make, and your experiences and your memories really do give us insights into something that is quite mysterious. Now, I know George Cavassalis has talked about we are all fractals of source energy, of universal source energy. He talks about the universal heart center and how we are fractals of that, but he talks about degrees of the kind of embodiment of that fractal source energy, and he says that humanity on Earth is a full embodiment of that universal fractal source energy, and he talks about other races as kind of being lesser manifestations of that. And I guess in terms of your experiences, then the Alpha Draconians and the Greys would be at the other side, where they are not fractal embodiments of source energy. They have chosen willingly to become instruments for conducting or carrying out this kind of AI consciousness. Is that correct?
So they are more of the service to self species. So I mean, but bear in mind also that we don't want to try and lump a species as a stereotype that all reptilians are bad, all greys are bad. Well, humans are bad as well. So that's my argument, because people will always say, "Oh, all the reptilians are bad and they're out to kill us and murder us and eat us." Well, newsflash, humans do the same thing, which is my argument. So my whole thing is that we need to find a balance in the narrative, because there's too much of the love and light that, oh, they're all here to save us or they're all here to kill us. But there's no one that's doing the critical thinking and saying, the common sense thinking and saying, is that if the regressive species were here, they would have already taken over our resources. But there is someone or something that is protecting us from going that way. So when people say, something's going to happen in 2027, if there's a comet coming or something, I'm like, if it comes, it comes. Because what I was shown in my regression, that we're part of the prime creator of all source, and that eventually we will go back to the creator. That's pretty much the full circle for me, in the sense that is the story of life. The prime creator decided when the universe started that it wanted to experience itself in different life forms. So spread out over the universe, gave itself free will. Now it's the free will that makes the species malevolent or benevolent in our eyes, right? So as I said, we think of all reptilians as bad because they eat us. But how do we know that a fish or a cow or a chicken doesn't think the same way of us? So different levels of consciousness.
Well, I just wanted to kind of explore, this slide that you shared, because I think it does reveal something very important. Because you talk about, you were a Draco reptilian at that point. You developed a soul, and I guess your superiors somehow detected that you had developed a soul, and I guess they essentially killed you. I mean, they had that soul extract removed, put into a glass container, and the Greys took it off. And that's very interesting, because Alex Collier described a very similar process where he said the Greys, or he called them the Dows, that they would take children, or Earth children, and that they would extract the souls from the bodies, and of course the body then would be an empty vessel, would die, I assume, immediately, and they would take those souls off in some kind of container, and they would sell it on the black market or the galactic market. So that's very interesting that the Draco reptilians have a method of detecting those amongst their own species that develop this kind of soul consciousness and will remove the soul and kill that body. That to me kind of is very revealing about the consciousness of that species.
So do you know why that is, Dr. Sala? They're obsessed with the soul. You can manipulate a body, you can manipulate the mind, but you can never manipulate the soul. And this is something that they're obsessed with trying to manipulate. So they can still extract the soul, they can fractalize the soul, put it into the bodies. But whoever has a piece of that soul is going to have the memories of that past life going down, which I've been getting. Now, Misha Johnston is another experiencer that I recently joined her experiencer support group for one Zoom session. And she was compelled to do a card reading for me immediately when she saw me. She says, I can see the Lyran being coming out from your face. This is who you were. But when she was pulling out my cards, she said, the Draco reptilians and the Greys are your arch enemy based on Mars. That's what she said. She pulled out that card. She said I was a hybrid. She also said that my biological DNA originates from Tau Ceti, which I never even thought of. I was like, where is Tau Ceti? So to me, when I try and filter all this information, I think we're an amalgamation of different species living on this planet through our DNA. But the soul, the pure soul essence, is the main battle. It's a battle for the soul. If they find a way to manipulate the soul, then they have won, but they never will. This is what I've been told by the carrion beings, by the avians. This is something that I was shown in the sense that I went to see God or the All, and that was the most profound experience of my life. So after that, my perspective on death changed. I'm not afraid. I could die tomorrow and I would be fine. And a lot of people are very, very, it's hard for them to come to terms with that when you're at peace with that, because then you don't have that fear.
So that would suggest that for us now, at this time, the most important thing we can do is develop our soul awareness and make this connection to universal. We are fractals of the universal heart center. That's how George Kavasalis describes it. And so we are fractals of the universal essence. And so the more we can cultivate that awareness, the more we establish ourselves in the soul consciousness. And of course, the other side is doing the opposite.
Yes. And look, what's happening right now in the States is a mixture of black tech. This is just my humble opinion. It's a mixture of black tech. It's a mixture of NHI kind of teasing themselves and saying, come on, masses, you need to wake up. And now people are feeling that ontological shock, saying, oh my God, is this a drone? Is this an orb? Is this an NHI? And now the waters are being muddied. But I've spoken to other high-level experiencers, and the message they got is either disclose or we will. And now we are in that process. So we are now in the thick of the process of disclosure. And we will have that disclosure in the next 2-3 years maximum. I've been going through this process since I was 11. I'm 44, going on 45. And for me, this is just my soul journey. And there was another interesting connection I found as well, Dr. Sala. So this emblem I'm wearing here is called a Farhova. This is our emblem for Ahura Mazda, which is the supreme being in the Zoroastrian religion. Now, I am not religious at all. But when my parents initiated me into Zoroastrianism, they said, wear your vest. It's a holy vest called a sadra, and a kasti, which is a string. It's your spiritual armor. I remember the day I took it off was when all hell broke loose with all this stuff happening. And I've never put it back on. But now I wear this for spiritual protection, not because I'm religious, but because this is an emblem of Ahura Mazda, which is the prime creator. But this is also Ningishita. In your first book, Army Insider missions, when JB speaks about going down to the underground city with the Ant people and seeing Yashira, seeing the Tree of Life, and right above the Tree of Life is this emblem, which is the Farhova. So I'm connecting the dots. And I've got this book by Michael Tellinger, and he actually says it on one of the pages that the Zoroastrians depict the Anunnaki. And in our fire temples, all the emblems, everything is almost like it's Anunnaki. So I feel like we're worshipping the Anunnaki in some form. I will probably be roasted alive by Zoroastrians and Parsis for saying that, but I'm putting two and two together, and it is the truth. There were beings that came to this planet, that diversified us in these religious groups. And Zoroastrianism is one of the oldest religions in the world, if not the oldest. And I'm not speaking from a religious or fanatical perspective. I'm just saying I'm connecting these dots with these ancient alien theories that the same emblem is seen everywhere. It's seen above Mingashida, in the Sumerian tablet, in the Tree of Life. It's in our fire temples. It's the emblem that we wear as Persians or Parsis. We call it Ahura Mazda, the supreme creator. And the religion is based on duality. So Angra Menu or Ahriman is Lucifer, and Ahura Mazda is the light. So it's a battle for the soul, which is what I've come to my conclusion with whatever's happening right now.
Right. Okay. So it's very interesting that the Zoroastrian religion and faith has diminished from its height in the Middle East when, as you said, there was this very strong connection with the memories of the Anunnaki and the records that describe their activities, to now Zoroastrianism just being, as you said, 50,000 people scattered around the world. That it's a very small number left, but somehow those that survived have kept the memory alive, and that Anunnaki connection is important because now, as you know from Elena Danan's work, a positive faction of the Anunnaki have returned for the first time in 11,000 years or 12,000 years, and they're now playing an important role behind the scenes to awaken us and bring back higher consciousness, Christ consciousness, kind of like this awareness of universal source energy.
Yes, so there's a speculation amongst the experiencer group that I'm speaking to. For privacy, I won't divulge who they are. But the speculation is that there's two competing factions that are coming to a nexus point by 2027, which is the Reptilians, the Draco Reptilians, and the Guardians, the Golden Ones, or Anunnaki, whatever you want to call them. So this war is going to be played out very shortly in front of our eyes. And that is why Lou Elizondo's book is imminent, although he cannot say it because he's bound by his NDAs. I'm not bound by any NDAs. I'm making speculations based on my experiences and speaking to other experiencers that something of a transformation is coming for humanity. And you're part of it, sir. Deeply, deeply appreciate you, all that you've done for disclosure. It was always my dream one day to speak to you, and I don't know how I manifested that. I'm still pinching myself, but I really thank you, Dr. Salah, for all that you've done for the community, for disclosure, and just having that resilience, in the light of your story, how you've gone from being an academic and now living, aligning your purpose with your passion. So incredibly grateful. Thank you, Dr. Salah.
Well, I want to thank you, Mack, for your courage in going through that very difficult journey of remembering these different aspects of your experiences and as you said, some very troubling memories there. But I think you've brought in some very rich insights into some of the different species out there and what they're doing. So I wish you well, and I look forward to talking to you in the future. So if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, where do they go?
Sure. So I'm very active on X. My account is Parsi, Parsi, 2 underscores and then an X. It's got the face of the lion, and it's got my name, Mack Mazda. So my DMs are open. I'm happy to connect with like-minded people, with experiencers. And I'll end on these few notes. Dr. Salah is a quote from Jim Rohn, a motivational speaker. It takes all of us to make each of us. So each of us can't do this on our own. You know? And I'll end by saying that together we are stronger, and together we are the disclosure. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Salah.
Thank you,
and
man.
I love to JP and Elena and everyone.
Sure, they'll appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.